You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. During this 4-part series for the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast historical series, we are looking back at Australia's 4 Test Series wins in India. Previously, in Part 1, we look back at Australia's maiden Test Series win in 1956, where Australian captain Ian Johnson led his side to victory. In Part 2, we look back at Australia's victorious series win in India in 1959, where captain Richie Benaud led his side to victory on their tour of Pakistan and India. The 1959 Test tour to Pakistan and India was a completely different tour that Australia undertook to Pakistan and India in 1956. Australia had a new captain in Richie Benaud, who took over the captaincy from Ian Craig in 1958 when Craig was battling hepatitis. Benaud's captaincy got off to a winning start, guiding Australia to a 4-0 home Ashes series win, seeing Australia reclaim the Ashes for the first time since 1950-51. This tour to Pakistan and India was Benaud's first overseas tour as captain. Unlike in 1956, Australia had plenty of time to prepare for the Test matches in Pakistan and India. Tour matches were scheduled for Australia in between the Test matches across Pakistan and India. So Australia embarked on their 3-month tour to Pakistan and India between November and January of 1959-60. The Test series in Pakistan consisted of 3 Test matches and 1 tour match. The schedule was as follows. First Test, November the 13th to the 18th at the Dhaka Stadium, Dacca. Second Test, November the 21st to the 26th at the Lahore Stadium, Lahore. Tour match against the Pakistan Presidents 11, November the 28th to the 30th at the Pindi Club Ground, Rawalpindi. And the third Test, December the 4th to the 9th at the National Stadium, Karachi. The Test series in India consisted of 5 Test matches and 1 tour match. The series between India and Australia in 1959 was the second Test series that featured 5 Test matches. Australia and India had previously played a 5 Test series back in 1947-48 in Australia. The schedule was as follows. First Test, December the 12th to the 16th at the Fisher Kotla, Delhi. Second Test, December the 19th to the 24th at Green Park, Kanpur. Third Test, January the 1st to the 6th at the Brabourne Stadium at Bombay. Tour match against Indian universities, January the 9th to the 11th at the Central College Ground, Bangalore. Fourth Test, January the 13th to the 17th at the Corporation Stadium, Madras. And the fifth Test, January the 23rd to the 28th at Eden Gardens, Calcutta. The 1959 Test tour to Pakistan and India was going to present lots of challenges to the Australian team on the field of play. But it was going to present challenges off the field in the form of illness. When Australia toured Pakistan and India in 1956, the team didn't have any problems in terms of dealing with illness. Captain Richie Benaud was keen on having some medical assistance on the tour. The team, while in Pakistan and India, would have access to doctors, pharmacists, and general medical people. But Benaud thought Australia needed a doctor travelling with the team, so the doctor would be able to liaise with their local counterparts, and more importantly be instantly available at all times of the day or night, if needed. Benaud's unofficial recommendation to the board was they should find out who was available. The board selected a very handy option. They selected Ian McDonald, who played for Victoria in Sheffield Shield cricket as a wicketkeeper, before retiring to pursue his medical career. Benaud thought this was a great choice. If any of the touring squad was ill and Australia was short of a player, having McDonald was a great asset. Benaud's biggest worry was hepatitis, which is an inflammation of the liver that is caused by a variety of infections, viruses and non-infectious agents, leading to a range of health problems, some of which can be fatal. Benaud's worries became reality, as some Australian players suffered hepatitis and some suffered dysentery, which is an inflammation of the intestines, accompanied by bloody diarrhoea. The Australian team employed a strict diet of boiled eggs, dried toast, bananas, tea and coffee, and avoiding unboiled water, including ice and washed salads, to help combat illness. But even that couldn't keep out illness, so Team Dr. Ian McDonald was kept busy. The players to suffer illness on the tour to Pakistan and India were as follows. Gordon Roque was flown home from India suffering serious dysentery and hepatitis. Rookie South Australian opening batsman Gavin Stevens was violently unwell with hepatitis A on the eve of the fourth test at Madras against India. He was rushed to a local private hospital. His condition stabilised and was airlifted back to Australia from Madras. He never played first-class cricket again. Spinner Lindsay Klein succumbed to hepatitis and was flown back to Australia. Neil Harvey was suffering from dysentery during the first test in Pakistan. Despite these challenges that were going to be presented to Australia on and off the field, Australia were looking forward to the tour of Pakistan and India. A different tone to the one shared when Australia toured Pakistan and India in 1956. Captain Richie Benaud echoed his team's excitement in his 2010 book, Over But Not Out, where he recalled the 1959-60 tour to Pakistan and India by noting, and I quote, "We were looking forward to the tour, although we weren't not quite certain what it will all entail, because this was the first time the Australian Cricket Board had sent a team on tour to the subcontinent. I reckoned, at that stage, we could have done no more by the way of preparation. You hear of people beating their chests and anointing those slightly pretentious words, 'We are ready.' We, in fact, had absolutely no idea if we were ready. But we were available and had been chosen. So it was a case of let's get at it." The Australian Test squad that was selected for the 1959 tour to Pakistan and India was a squad full of experience and inexperienced players. There was no question of this being an A tour, and the Australian Cricket Board reflected that in their selection of the squad, picking the 15 best players. 7 members of the playing squad had previous Test experience in Pakistan and India, having been a part of the 1956 tour. The players to have prior experience were Captain Richie Benaud, Alan Davidson, Neil Harvey, Peter Burge, Ray Lindwall, Ken Mackay, and Colin MacDonald. So for those players, it was important to share their knowledge to the other inexperienced squad members. So for Captain Richie Benaud, he had a squad that was more than capable of winning the Test matches in Pakistan and India. The squad selected for the Test tour to Pakistan and India were as follows. Richie Benaud captain, Neil Harvey vice-captain, Peter Burge, Alan Davidson, Ken Mackay, Barry Jarman, wicketkeeper, Colin MacDonald, Ian Metcalfe, Les Favell, Wally Grout, wicketkeeper, Lindsay Klein, Ray Lindwall, Norm O'Neill, Gordon Roque, Gavin Stevens, and Sam Loxton was the team manager, former Australian player and member of the 1948 Invincibles. Australia arrived at Dacca, where they were met by the local Pakistan officials and were given a very warm welcome ahead of the first test. Fazal Mahmood was there to greet the Australian team. He caused Australia all sorts of problems in the one-off test against Australia back in 1956, where he took 13 wickets for the match on the matting. In the lead-up to the tour of Pakistan in 1959, the Australian Cricket Board wanted some assurances from the Pakistan cricket officials that they had fallen into line with other international venues and would produce turf pitches for the 1959 series. The Australian Cricket Board received some vague assurances from the Pakistan Cricket Board, but no written guarantee was forthcoming. With uncertainty surrounding the type of pitches Australia would be playing on, Captain Richie Benaud took a calculated gamble during an exhibition game played in Brisbane to celebrate Queensland's centenary, which took place shortly before Australia departed for the tour to Pakistan and India in 1959. Before play on each day of the Benaud 11 versus the Lindwall 11 exhibition match, Benaud arranged for the Gabba ground staff to lay out a length of matting over a closely cropped section of the outfield where squad members for the upcoming Test tour could ready themselves should recent history repeat when Australia played on the mat during the 1956 tour to Pakistan. Benaud, in his 2010 book Over But Not Out, when he wrote, and I quote, "Conditions weren't exactly the same, but on a pitch with canvas matting over short-cut grass which was watered and rolled in the outfield, it wasn't far away from what I remembered as the manner in which the surface had played in Karachi 3 years earlier. It would have been no use at all putting down a mat on an ordinary Gabba net pitch, as the undersurface would have been far too hard and the bounce of the ball would have been much higher than in Pakistan." The first test of the series was played at the Dhaka Stadium, Dacca. Benaud's calculated gamble paid off. When Australia inspected the Dhaka pitch, they saw a strip of bare dirt hewn from the lush surrounding grass and being readied for its matting overlay. Upon the change in plans, Benaud was told that in addition to problems getting the grass to grow and a malfunction with the roller, the PCB's telex machine broke down, which meant news of the decision to use matting couldn't be relayed to the Australian Cricket Board. Australia deployed Lindsay Klein, 12th man for the first test, as an auxiliary groundsman who would depart the team's hotel hours before the team to ensure the mat was stretched taut and that no errant stones somehow found their way underneath. The preparation of the mat in Brisbane paid off for Australia, as they won the first test by 8 wickets. Captain Benaud sent Pakistan in. Pakistan lost Ijaz Butt early, but Hanif Mohammed and Saeed Ahmed improved Pakistan's position with a second wicket stand of 72, and after the fall of the third wicket at 82. Mohammed received some assistance from Duncan Sharp, who was on test debut. Ken Mackay struck the important blow, removing Mohammed for 66, a quarter of an hour before stumps on day one. Sharp was batting well until Norm O'Neill ran him out from cover point. Mackay ripped through Pakistan's tail end, and Pakistan were all out for 200. Australia were bowled out for 225 in their first innings. Australia found scoring difficult. Neil Harvey played a splendid innings of 96. He was suffering from dysentery and was forced to leave the field half a dozen times during his innings. Wicketkeeper Wally Grout supported Harvey, scoring 66 not out. He hit 7 fours, which came in an hour and 25 minutes, to secure Australia a first innings lead. Fazal Mahmood was the pick of the Pakistan bowlers, taking 5 for 71. Pakistan were all out for 134 and set Australia 100 runs to win. Mackay, bowling his off-spinners on a perfect length, troubled Pakistan's batsmen. Only Test debutant Duncan Sharp was the only batsman to defy Mackay for any length of time. Australia chased 110 with ease, finishing on 2 for 112. Australia had banished the demons they faced on the mat in 1956. For Pakistan, they knew Australia had come prepared and were going to be difficult to beat. The second test took place at the Lahore Stadium, Lahore. Australia wrapped up the series to win by 7 wickets and became the first team to win a test series in Pakistan. Pakistan struggled in their first innings against the pace of Alan Davidson and Ian Metcalfe and the spin of Captain Richie Benaud and Lindsay Klein, despite the easy nature of the turf pitch. Pakistan was bowled out for 146. Australia, in reply, scored 9 declared for 391 in their first innings. The Australian batsmen scored steadily, despite some frequent bowling changes from Pakistan. Norm O'Neill was very aggressive with the bat, hitting 19 fours in his 134, his first test century. O'Neill batted for 3 hours and 40 minutes. Imtiaz Ahmed provided some stern resistance by Pakistan in their second innings, and Saeed Ahmed batted with the utmost concentration, scoring 166. He and Shudyar Din added 169 in 5 hours and 20 minutes for the third wicket. When the last day began, Pakistan stood 43 runs ahead with 7 wickets in hand. But Lindsay Kline, with his left-arm slows, exploited worn patches and brought about a collapse. Pakistan were bowled out for 366, and they set Australia 122 to win. Australia chased down the 122-run target in just under 2 hours and achieved victory with 12 minutes to spare. The third test was held at the National Stadium, Karachi. The final test ended in a draw and Australia won the series 2-0. Play during the test was drab for most of the time during this third test. Pakistan took 8 hours and 48 minutes to score 287 all out in their first innings. Australia, in reply, scored 257 all out in their first innings. Australia showed more enterprise than Pakistan on the batting pitch. They needed a last wicket stand of 50 between Alan Davidson and Ray Lindwall to keep their first innings deficit down to 30. Pakistan scored 8 declared for 194 in their second innings to set Australia 225 runs to win. Hanif Mohammed top scored with 101. With 2 hours left of the test match, Australia didn't seriously attempt to chase down 225. Australia finished their second innings on 2 for 83 to draw the test. This test match was the last test to be played with a matted pitch in Pakistan. Then US President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was pushing for close diplomatic ties with Pakistan. He watched a day's play during the test with his Pakistan counterpart Arub Khan. Seizing his chance when introduced to the Pakistan president during the game, Benaud and Australian team manager Sam Loxton impressed upon the leader that his nation's standing in the eyes of the cricketing world would be considerably enhanced if they played all future test matches on turf pitches, instead on matting. And, just like that, jute matting became another relic of the game's storied past. The tour of Pakistan in 1959 was a successful tour for Australia. A 2-0 series win is a good result. Australia banished the demons of the 1956 tour, where they were all at sea on the mat, where Fazal Mahmood was unplayable. Australia conquered the mat, all thanks to the forward thinking from Captain Richie Benaud, having the test squad practice on matting in Brisbane before the tour put Australia in good stead. Benaud's first overseas tour as captain led to a series win in Pakistan, but for Benaud and his Australian team, their biggest test was to come in India. A big crowd welcomed the Australian team to New Delhi when they arrived from Pakistan. Australia picked up where they left off on the last tour in 1956, winning the first test of the series by an innings and 127 runs. India elected to bat first and were bowled out for 135 in the first innings. Richie Benaud claimed the unusual figures of 3 for none from 3.4 overs. Australia, in reply, scored a match-winning total of 468 all out in their first innings. Both Australian openers, Colin McDonald and Les Favell, were dismissed early. With 64 runs scored, Australia soon took the lead thanks to Neil Harvey and Ken Mackay putting on a 132-run stand in 97 minutes. Harvey went on to score his 14th Test century, 114 in 3 hours and 20 minutes. India's fielding was poor, and wicketkeeper Wally Grout, who scored 42, and Ian Metcalf, who scored 45, took advantage of it. Pankaj Roy, who scored 99, and Nari Contractor, who scored 34, gave India a good start in their second innings, scoring 121 before being separated. The Australian spin pair of Benaud and Lindsay Kline hustled the next 9 batsmen out for the addition of 85 runs to bowl India out for 206. Disappointed spectators threw bottles on the field as India crumbled to a crushing defeat. Australia took the series lead, and it was all thanks to splendid spin bowling by Captain Benaud and Kline, fast scoring from Harvey and the tailenders of Grout and Metcalf. For India, a disappointing result for the home side. The second test at Green Park, Kanpur, was a test to remember for India. Both teams headed to Kanpur for the second test of the 5-test series. Australia were in the box seat with a 1-0 series lead, but that was all to change. After the disappointing defeat from the first test, India recorded their first ever test win over Australia, winning by 119 runs. Even though it was a team effort, one player stood out. Ahmedabad off-spinner Jasu Patel was the chief architect of India's historic test win over Australia. Patel, who was brought into the side for the Kanpur test, he was 35 years old. He had just played 5 tests in the preceding 5 years, and his career was generally considered over. But he was brought out of semi-retirement, and the rest is history. India batted first and scored 152 all out in their first innings. India collapsed alarmingly on the first day. Benaud began the slide after lunch, taking 4 for 63 in 25 overs, and Alan Davidson, 5 for 31 in 20.1 overs, pressed home the advantage for Australia when India slumped from 38 for no wicket to 152 all out. Australia, in reply, were bowled out for 219 in the first innings, claiming a lead of just 67 runs. The Indian bowlers failed to gain any assistance from the pitch when Australia replied and 71 was scored before Jasu Patel dismissed Australian opener Gavin Stevens. Then Australia suffered a dramatic batting collapse as Patel ripped through Australia. Patel took 8 for 24 and managed to keep Australia to a 50-plus run lead. Patel exploited the freshly new-laid turf at Kanpur and claimed figures of 9 for 69 in 35.5 overs in the first innings, to claim India's best bowling figures in Test cricket. But those figures were soon to be surpassed when Anil Kumble took 10 for 74 versus Pakistan in 1999. India showed some improvement with the bat in their second innings, scoring 291 all out, setting Australia 225 runs to win. Nari Contractor top scored with 74, and the rest of the Indian batsmen chipped in with good contributions with the bat. Alan Davidson was Australia's standout bowler, taking 7 for 93 in 57.3 overs. He also claimed match figures of 12 for 124. Australia were bowled out for 105 in their second innings. Colin McDonald, Neil Harvey and Thailander Lindsay Klein scored 73 runs between them. They batted with ease, but the other 7 batsmen, with the exception of Gordon Roque, who was absent ill, could only muster up 20 runs against the Indian spinners of Patel and Polyurigma. Just like in the first innings, Patel was the main destroyer, picking up 5 for 55 in 25.4 overs to claim match figures of 14 for 142. Urigma supported Patel nicely, picking up 4 for 27 from 25 overs. When reflecting on India's historic test victory at Kanpur in his 2010 book, Over But Not Out, Richie Benaud said, and I quote, "When we had loss on the last afternoon at Kanpur, I walked out onto the field and shook hands with Gulabari Ramchand, their skipper, and all my players stood at the entrance to the playing field and clapped the Indian team into the dressing room and congratulated them. Then we watched as they were garlanded and fettered around the ground, cheered by thousands and hit by a few unripe guavas, held or shanghaied by some of the happy students. There was not the slightest doubt within our team that we had been beaten by a better side, and it was a matter now of organising ourselves for the next game." With the series at 1-1, the teams headed to the Brabourne Stadium at Bombay for the third test of the series. Indian captain Gulabari Ramchand won the toss and chose to bat first on a really good batting surface. India suffered a blow in the morning of the match when Jasu Patel, their match-winning bowler, reported sick. India were bowled out for 289 in their first innings. Panjay Roy and Polyurigma fell quickly to Alan Davidson, but Nari Contractor found a splendid partner in Abbas Ali Bragg, who scored 50. They put on a 133-run partnership, which wasn't broken until the second day. Contractor completed a solid century of 108. The persistent pace of Davidson and Ian Metcalf whittled away the rest of the Indian innings. Australia, in reply, scored 8 declared for 387 in their first innings. Indian spinner Bapu Nakarni took 6 for 105 in 51 overs. Bowling his left-arm slows accurately, he carried a heavy burden for India with the ball. Polly Rugma bowled only a few overs because of back trouble, and Salin Durrani, the replacement for Patel, couldn't bowl because of a cut finger. After Nandari dismissed the openers of Colin MacDonald and Gavin Stevens, Neil Harvey and Norm O'Neill joined in a third-wicket partnership of 207. Both reached triple figures, O'Neill 163 batting for 6 hours, and Harvey 102 batted for 3/4 hours. India scored 5 declared for 226 in the second innings to set Australia 129 runs to win. A determined opening partnership by Roy and Contractor and more sound batting from Bragg and Kenny made India safe. Australia only had 25 minutes to make 129 runs, which was an impossible task as they finished on 1 for 34. With the drawn test at Bombay, the series was still at 1-1 when the teams headed to the Corporation Stadium for the fourth test at Madras. Australia won by an innings and 55 runs to lead the series 2-1. Richie Benaud won the toss and Australia batted first. Australia batted slowly on day one and made 183 for 3. India's bowlers struck better form on the second day and dismissed 4 Australian batsmen before lunch for just 82 runs. Les Favell top scored with 101. He only added 1 to his overnight score of 100. Ken Mackay in a dour and tenacious innings of 89, which lasted 3.5 hours, he acted as a sheet anchor, and when he was last out, Australia's total reached 342 all out. India began their second innings well and passed 100 for the loss of 2 wickets. Then a splendid spell of bowling from Richie Benaud of 5 for 43 in 32.1 overs. He was turning his leg breaks appreciably and dismissed 4 batsmen for 7 runs. That dented India's confidence, but only the wicketkeeper, Kundaraman, was the only batsman who appeared confident, top scoring with 71, which included 12 fours. India were bowled out for 149. Benaud had no hesitation in enforcing the follow-on. 193 runs behind, India suffered with the bat to be bowled out for 138. Benaud, like in the first innings, was responsible for India's batting demise. He took 3 wickets for 43 runs and finished with match figures of 8 for 86. Benaud repeatedly changed the bowling, allowing the Indian batsmen little opportunity to settle. Going into the final test at Eden Gardens, Calcutta, Australia led the series 2-1. A win or a draw would secure the series for Australia. For India, they needed to win to avoid a third consecutive series defeat to Australia. A long tour of Pakistan and India was beginning to take its toll on Australia. Australia was heavily depleted in playing personnel in the lead up to the 5th test, with players suffering illness. The medical situation had become dire, and for Team Dr. Ian MacDonald, he had his hands full. Fast bowler Gordon Rourke was flown home from India, suffering serious dysentery and hepatitis. South Australian opener Gavin Stevens became violently ill with hepatitis A on the eve of the 4th test at Madras. He was rushed to a local private hospital. The 27-year-old was swathed in ice-soaked towels for 11 days to try and reduce his fever, while the team travelled to Calcutta. His condition stabilised and was airlifted home from Madras, but never played first-class cricket again. Also, spinner Lindsay Klein succumbed to hepatitis and was flown home. Ken Mackay was ill as well, but Australia was so short on players, Mackay had to play. Captain Richie Benaud wasn't ill, but had a bout of neuritis in his left arm and a disculated spinning finger, but he pushed on and played. Australia in the end managed to get an 11 for the test. India batted first, and their hopes of winning and drawing the series were dashed on day one, when they lost half the side for 112. Careful batting from Gopinath and Jaisama improved India's situation. But early on the second morning, Alan Davidson finished off the Indian innings by removing Ramchand and Desai. India were bowled out for 194. Australia, in reply, made 331 all out in their first innings. The Australian batsmen were in some difficulty against the Indian bowlers, but they gained a first innings lead just after tea for the loss of 3 wickets. The highlight was the 4th wicket partnership between O'Neill and Burge of 113. O'Neill top scored with 113. His innings included 15 fours before Desai had him caught at the wicket. The rest of the batsmen put up little resistance, and Australia lost the last 4 wickets for 18 runs. Needing 137 runs to avoid an innings defeat, India began their second innings badly, losing Kundaraman for a duck. India's position deteriorated to 123 for 5, before a stand of 83 between Jassama and Broad affected a partial recovery for India. Both of them scored well, Broad being especially severe on Benaud with powerful cuts and drives. Kenny, who also hit well, continued the fight to save the game on the final day. India set Australia 203 runs to win on the final day. Australia finished on 2 for 121 to seal the draw. Les Favell top scored with 62 not out. For Richie Benaud and his team, it was a 2-1 series win, and Australia had won their second straight Test series in India and third straight over India. For Benaud, his first tour to India as captain was a success. Also, with only 12 fit members of their touring squad still standing after illness swept through the squad, a 2-1 series win is a fantastic achievement. After 3 crowded months, which saw them play 8 Test matches, winning 4, losing 1, and drawing 3, the Australian team left the subcontinent, having conquered Pakistan and India. The 1959 Test tour to Pakistan and India was a tour that tested the Australians, on and off the field, especially off the field, as the team battled severe illness in the form of dysentery and hepatitis. With key squad members being sent home, the team was down to only 12 fit players once Australia wrapped up the series in India after drawing the final test. But despite those challenges, the Australian team, led by the marvellous Richie Benaud, were able to get the job done. In Pakistan, they became the first ever team to win a series in Pakistan, winning the series 2-0. Australia overcame the challenge of playing on the matting pitches, all thanks to their captain Richie Benaud, who took the initiative of having the Test squad prepare on matting pitches in Australia before they departed for the tour. When Australia arrived in India for the Test series, they were a side who won 11 of its last 16 Tests and lost none. They were hailed as one of the strongest teams to visit India. They were the leading side in the world at the time. Having conquered in the past 3 years India, South Africa, England and Pakistan, the Australian team lived up to that reputation and won the series 2-1 and continued their dominant Test record over India. The tour in 1959 saw some players excel and achieve great things. Captain Richie Benaud picked up where he left off from the 1956 Test tour to Pakistan and India by having a dominant series with the ball in 1959. He took 49 wickets for the tour. 47 of them came in the Test matches. Benaud was the leading wicket-taker in the Pakistan series, taking 18 wickets, and he took 29 wickets in the India series, tied with Alan Davidson. He outshone the battery of fast bowlers who had expected to do so much for Australia. Only Davidson really achieved anything of note for the fast bowlers, taking 29 wickets for the series and claiming best match figures of 12 for 124 in the second test at Kanpur. The tour was dominated by the batting of Norm O'Neill, the aggressive New South Wales batsman who was touted as the next Sir Donald Bradman. He justified that tag by topping the test averages of 66 runs an innings, and this rose to 85.54 in the first-class averages. O'Neill scored 218 runs with 1 century in Pakistan and scored 376 runs with 2 centuries in India. O'Neill hit his first Test century against Pakistan, 134 in the second Test at Lahore. Altogether, he made 300s on the tour, 3 of them against Pakistan and India. His highest score was 284 against the Indian President 11 in the tour match. Other Australian batsmen joined O'Neill in the century makers list. Neil Harvey with 2 and Les Favell with 1 scored Test centuries in the India series. Ray Lindwall, who took 9 wickets across the 2 series, became Australia's leading wicket-taker in Test cricket with 228 wickets in 61 Tests. He retired on his return to Australia, falling 8 wickets short of the all-time Test record held by Alec Bedser. For Captain Richie Benaud, his first overseas assignment as Test captain of Australia was successful. Having only taken up the job in 1958-59, he led Australia with distinction, and this kick-started the Benaud era. Benaud would go on to lead Australia for another few years and would become one of Australia's great Test captains. When reflecting on the 1959 tour to Pakistan and India, in his 2010 book, Over But Not Out, Benaud noted, and I quote, "Captaining the first official team to India and Pakistan was quite an experience. But we managed well and won both series against the odds. We achieved that without the hardly believable number of support staff which are a part of every sporting team these days. All we had was Sam Loxton, formerly a 1948 Invincibles player, and 11 years later, manager of my team. We had Dr. Ian MacDonald, an expert in tropical ailment. We had Benaud as captain, and we used our brains without bothering with today's compulsory bonding sessions." Australia's success in India continued 10 years later when Captain Bill Lawry led his side to victory in the 1969 series. Hi everyone, hope you enjoyed part 2 of our historical series, looking back at Australia's Test series wins in India back in 1959. Stay tuned for part 3, where we look at Australia's 1969 Test series win in India, where Captain Bill Lawry led his side to victory.